Good evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight for our RiverWatch Winter Speaker Series. For those of you who maybe aren't very familiar with Illinois RiverWatch, we are a community science organization that trains volunteers to monitor water quality in their own local communities. The mission of RiverWatch is to safeguard the future of Illinois rivers and streams through stewardship, education, and sound science. Before we get started tonight, I'd like to ask you to keep your microphones muted during the presentation to limit distractions. We will have a Q&A session after the presentation, so if you have a question along the way, feel free to put it in the chat box, and then we can ask those questions out loud at the end, or you can save the question and ask it out loud yourself once the presentation has concluded. And now I am pleased to welcome Jean Ponzi. Jean serves as the Green Resources Manager at the Missouri Botanical Garden in St. Louis, a 29-year veteran of the Garden's Earthways Center team. Green Jean currently applies her sustainability expertise as the manager of the St. Louis Green Business Challenge, operator of the Garden's Green Resources Information Service, and on the leadership team for the regional initiative Biodiverse City St. Louis. Her Enviro interview show called Earthworms has logged over 33 years of conversations on KDHX St. Louis Community Media, and that's something she does as a community service as a volunteer. Jean is in demand as a speaker, a writer, and a media spokesperson, offering her audiences both practical options and ecological inspiration. So we are very pleased to have Jean with us tonight. And I'm going to stop sharing and let her begin to share her screen. So Jean, thank you for being here and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Danelle. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's especially a pleasure to get to do it from good old Zoom, where you don't have to drive across state lines. Isn't that efficient? So all of that, thank you for that introduction. Yes, that is a bunch of stuff that I've been doing around our St. Louis metro area for a while. And this subject matter, I got to say, especially the mosquito part of it, that has really become one of my jams, one of my particular favorite hunks of subject matter. So let's see, I'm not getting myself in speaker view here. Okay, that's okay. There we go. So what I would prefer than keeping your questions till the very end, I'm going to pause a couple of times and see if anyone has any questions. And Danielle, if you'd keep an eye on the chat and curate those a little bit, that would be very helpful. I would really appreciate that.
That'd be great. Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so here we go. Mosquitoes and monarchs. Control the pests and protect the pollinators. This is focusing on two bugs that everybody is aware of and that really have a lot to teach us about how we can be responsible neighbors for the insects and the plants and all of the living communities that we are a part of. And getting to speak to you all tonight at the very end of February, we're on the cusp of mosquito season because of climate shifts. It used to be that we didn't have mosquitoes buzzing around us until maybe the end of May. That is changing. Mosquito season is getting a lot longer. And this year, with the couple of hard freezes that we've had, maybe we'll have a little bit of a lighter mosquito year. Frankly, we're getting more mosquitoes and fewer monarchs, and it should be going just the other way around. But, Okay, so pollinator gardening. This is off the charts in popularity around our region. Just last Friday, I had the privilege and the pleasure of emceeing, I think maybe my 6th or 7th year of the annual Grow Native morning workshop for the Metro East communities. It was held at the N.O. Nelson campus of Lewis and Clark in Edwardsville. We had some great presentations about native plant gardening, about stormwater management through native plant gardening, garden design. And this is stuff that people just love and are participating in a really dynamic way all around our area. And it's my favorite subject to present on. It's a tremendously impactful thing that we can do anywhere we are, whatever our capacity. And then this is a relatively new project. I think we're going to be in our maybe third mosquito season, a collaboration, Mosquito Alert STL. It is a partnership of the Missouri Botanical Garden, myself, Jean Ponzi, the St. Louis University School of Public Health and Social Justice, Dr. Ricardo Ray, Janine Arrighi, who is a freelance partner of ours. She has retired as the head of vector control for the City of St. Louis Health Department, which is one of our partners. And then we also are working with St. Louis County Department of Public Health. And we have a couple of wonderful student interns that are working on their graduate degrees. I'll tell you a lot about this project as we go on. So here is another opportunity to participate in controlling the pests and protecting the pollinators by using the Citizen Science Project Mosquito Alert. More about that later. But first, what do you know about this insect? You can put this in the chat if you want to. I want to see who puts anything in first. It's not a viceroy, although that butterfly mimics this butterfly's coloring and kind of tags onto this butterfly's capacity to repel predators. It is a monarch, and whoa, you could tell Patricia Dunbar, you could tell it's a female monarch by the very specific dot pattern on the wings. That was extra dynamic as a response. Yes, this is Danis plexippus, the monarch butterfly. It's one of the most iconic creatures that we humans know and love. And this is an insect that is an example of an ecological specialist, a biological specialist. That means that in a plant or animal species, if they are a specialist, they have a one-to-one life or death reliance on another kind of species for some really critical thing. And with monarchs, it's their species reliance on plants in Asclepiadaceae, the milkweed family, for their reproduction, for their ability to perpetuate their own species. It's a very big deal to be a specialist. There are not a lot of them in nature. And the deal here is that milkweed caterpillars can only feed, I'm sorry, monarch caterpillars can only feed on the leaves of milkweed plants. If a monarch butterfly lays her eggs on a plant in anything other than the milkweed family, those caterpillars will hatch out and they will starve. So you want to be a monarch, you got to have milkweeds wherever you go. And that's another big deal for monarchs because of another remarkable habit they have. But first, the life cycle of a monarch. Very, very much like many, if not most, other insects. They start out as eggs. And here are monarch eggs effectively laid on milkweed leaves. You often will find them on the undersides of milkweed leaves, little tiny little white dots. And when you look at it up close, you can see a beautiful pattern of indentations and lines on that egg. It kind of presages what's going to happen when the monarch goes through its pupal stage on its way from being a caterpillar to being a butterfly. When the eggs hatch, out comes a larva. The larval stage is a next very common stage for many insects. And another word for larva is caterpillars. Now, when you are growing native plants, when you're gardening for pollinators, you want to have a lot of kinds of plants that will host insect larvae. Because if you want birds, you have to have caterpillars. You can feed adult birds seeds, but baby birds need protein, and they get that from caterpillars, insect larvae. Monarchs, on the other hand, have developed a remarkable adaptation. This is part of their specialist relationship with milkweed. Milkweed leaves contain a toxin. It's part of that milky sap, and monarchs have evolved to tolerate eating that toxin. The name of it escapes me right this moment. But one of the reasons why monarch caterpillars can be as vividly colored as they are, this is a coloration that would typically say to predators, birds, here I am, your lunch. But if a bird eats a monarch caterpillar and survives, that bird will not repeat the action because of the toxin that the caterpillars ingest from the milkweed, which is the only plant that they can eat in order to perpetuate their species. Just so interesting how things evolve. And then once the caterpillar will go through several instars, several shedding of skin. You'll see in the lower right there, you'll see several different sizes of caterpillar. Instar is the name of the transitional stage that insects usually in their larval phase of their life go through. They shed skins, they get larger and larger and larger. And once they get to a certain stage, that caterpillar will attach itself to the stem of usually a milkweed plant because that's where they are feeding, and will form a cocoon around itself, a chrysalis. It will go into its pupal stage in that chrysalis. And there is a remarkable video that you can, if you Google this online, it is a video of what happens in the chrysalis for monarchs. Within the caterpillar are all of the parts that will become the butterfly at this mature stage of the caterpillar's life. So it's not that the caterpillar kind of metamorphs into soup inside that chrysalis. It's that those butterfly parts are changing within the caterpillar's body inside the chrysalis. And when that metamorphosis is complete, that beautiful pale gray-green chrysalis will turn black, and that's how you know that a butterfly is about ready to hatch out. And from its pupal stage, it emerges as an adult. And as with many kinds of insects, at this transition from pupa to adult, the insect goes from being, in this case, it goes from being a plant-dependent a plant-dwelling insect to being an aerial or flying adult insect. And on the day that the monarch catches out of the chrysalis, it takes a little bit of time for its wings to unfold. The wings harden. It is subject to predators, particularly at that point in time. And once its wings fully unfold and they harden, then it is ready to become an airborne insect. And at that point, it's not just going to eat and mate, because monarchs do a lot more than that. They migrate. It's a remarkable phenomenon. No one really knows why they do it. The photograph on the lower left there shows monarch butterflies completely covering pine trees in the Oyamel pine forests of Mexico, which is where they overwinter. And the migrating habit of monarchs necessitates a lot of milkweed to help them survive. This is a map of the continental United States. You can see Canada there. You can see Mexico. There are two big migrating populations of monarchs. One pretty much goes from the coast to the inland of California, but the monarch populations that we are concerned with in this part of North America have a remarkable generational turnaround. So right now, in the winter, our winter, monarchs are overwintering in the south of Mexico. And the generation that is spending the winter in Mexico is the generation that hatched out here in the central US in the fall. That generation overwinters and will fly up on their migratory route headed toward Canada. They'll stop through the central part of the US and reproduce. And then that next generation will migrate up to Canada for the summer. They will reproduce. That generation will migrate back down to the central part of the US in the fall, reproduce, and that generation will head back down to Mexico, delay reproduction, and migrate back up into the central US, which is a really astonishing life pattern for any kind of living creature. And because of this reproductive necessity at certain points in particular seasons, when the monarchs come through, they need milkweed. They need to be able to find it. It needs to be abundant enough that they can lay eggs on it. The caterpillars can hatch out. Enough caterpillars can make it through predation and the other kinds of things that can decimate caterpillars in order for the species to survive. And we track this through Monarch tagging. Monarch Watch is a remarkable citizen science project that originated at KU in Lawrence, Kansas. Chip Taylor is the entomologist that gave rise to this. He initially studied other kinds of insects and just happened to be in Mexico one year when the monarchs were overwintering, and blammo, monarchs became his jam. So Monarch Watch is a project that distributes these butterfly tags to people who are willing to watch for, catch, and tag butterflies when they migrate through. Each tag has a unique number. So when you get them, when you are able to capture and tag a butterfly, you record the unique number, where and when that butterfly was tagged, and then at the end of that particular part of the migrating cycle, you send that information to Monarch Watch. When a butterfly that is tagged is spotted and captured and the tag number is recorded wherever it is in its migratory pattern, that enables Monarch Watch to track the health of populations. I have had the great honor of tagging 3 butterflies. We get caterpillars every year at the Missouri Botanical Garden, and we tag them and release them. And the tags, the tagging thing themselves, that's a really fascinating thing. 3M makes the adhesive on butterfly tags. They are light enough that they will adhere down through a cellular layer or two on the butterfly's wing, but they won't throw the butterfly's weight out of kilter, and they're round so that there are no corners to lift up when the butterfly is in flight. And this is one of those large print giveth and fine print taketh away things about science and ecology and industry partnership. 3M gave us Post-it notes and butterfly tags. They also gave us PFAS, polyfluoralkanated compounds, the forever chemicals that we now know are in our testes and breast milk, thanks to plastics and other substances. Wah, wah. So, tracking the health of monarch populations. Because this has been going on now, we're in 2025, 1994, we're approximately 30 years through this kind of tracking. We know that monarch populations are in severe decline. This is partly because of habitat loss along those migratory pathways. It's because of use of herbicides on agricultural lands, because we use so many herbicide tolerant crops these days. It's because farmers are growing their commodity crops all the way out to the margins of their lands instead of leaving hedgerows. It is also because of destruction of the IML pine forests in Mexico, and some of that is because of drug cartels and gang wars in Mexico. These are all, like, human things that are impacting other stuff. But we know that monarch populations have severely declined, and the tagging process, as well as participating in projects like Monarch Way Station, is another formal project that comes from KU. It's part of Monarch Watch. When you plant milkweed on your property and you encourage the planting of milkweed in your community, you help to restore some of that habitat that is vital for monarch reproduction in our area for the times when monarchs fly through. There are other concentrated habitat restoration projects. For example, on tribal lands in Oklahoma and in the southwestern United States, there is a very concentrated, very productive collaborative there to restore milkweed along that part of the migratory pathway. And just in general, garden for pollinators, plant native plants, encourage this in schools, encourage the adoption of native plant ordinances in your municipality. Talk to your neighbors about what you're doing, putting out the sign that says you are a pollinator habitat or you are a monarch way station. And we're very fortunate in our region. This is not just the state of Missouri anymore. It originated in the state of Missouri, but this is now a regional program. Grow Native is our regional native plant program. And in my opinion, this is the best native plant program in the nation. When you go to the website, grownative.org, it's a motherlode of stuff. Planting plans, plant lists, top 10 lists that run the gamut from top 10 plants for supporting monarchs, including what milkweed species do best in our area, all the way to top 10 plants that deer like less than other plants. There's no such thing as a plant that deer will not eat, but they are much less fond of some than others. And when you go to a locally owned garden center, which is the place to get the native plants, look for the purple and green tags, look for purple pots, look for the shelving where the plants are displayed to be painted purple. That is part of Grow Native's branding. They have a certification program for professionals. They publish an annual resource guide. It is, I have worked in the green space for over 30 years, and I have encountered very few one-stop shops. This is one, Grow Native. And one of my favorite things about it is the name is an imperative. Grow Native, exclamation point. It does not dink around. So gardening for pollinators, and particularly including milkweed in your pollinator gardening, that is a very powerful you can do relative to pollinators in general and monarchs specifically. Let me pause here and just see if anybody has any questions before I go on to the other bug in the chat. What should be our stance on people raising monarchs in captivity and then releasing? You know, it's a challenging thing to do, Joey Anthony. We, as I said, we do that at the Missouri Botanical Garden in our Brookings Interpretive Center so that we are able to introduce our guests, particularly children and families, to this whole story about monarchs. Raising them in captivity like farming monarchs, I am not aware of very much effort along these lines, or certainly have not heard about a lot of um, uh, uh, very much in this enterprise regard. Much better, I think, than worrying about this or even protesting it would be the activity of gardening for pollinators and specifically gardening for monarchs. But thanks for bringing that up. I don't see anything else in the chat, so I'm going to bug on to this insect. What do you know about this one? Doot, 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 doot. What are this insect's pronouns? They are she, her. This is a female mosquito. Only female mosquitoes bite. They are equipped with a proboscis that allows them to pierce the skin of their prey of choice. They take a blood meal, not for nourishment, but for reproduction. The female mosquito needs blood from a prey species in order to get the protein to produce eggs. A really good punchline about this is it's one of the places in nature, maybe one of the few places in all of biology where the guys are blameless. So if a mosquito lands on you and is taking a blood meal, you know that that's a female mosquito. Male mosquitoes actually, male and female mosquitoes live about the same amount of time. That's not necessarily true for a lot of insects, but male mosquitoes have solely reproductive capacity with the females, and then the females do most of that big lift. And with mosquitoes, like monarchs, they go through a series of phases, metamorphosing phases in their life cycle. They start out as eggs. Now, with mosquitoes, they are aquatic insects up until their adult stage. And one of the ways that you can tell what kind of mosquitoes you have in your area, and this is very important relative to disease and awareness and mosquito control, you can tell what species of mosquitoes you have by the way they lay their eggs. Many mosquitoes will lay their eggs in rafts, and you see a couple of examples of that, different colors. Some mosquitoes will lay their eggs in a more scattered pattern that will look like little seeds, or, sometimes they look kind of like mouse poop, but they're in water. Mouse poop doesn't usually float. So mosquito eggs, a female mosquito can lay up to 1,000 eggs in a lifetime. Female mosquitoes can produce multiple generations of eggs in their life cycle. And they are always laid on water. They are always laid on standing water. Moving water will not facilitate mosquito reproduction all the way through the different stages. And female mosquitoes gravid mosquitoes look for standing water because it typically has plant matter dissolving in it. There's gunk in standing water, and that is what the developing mosquito larvae need for nutrition. So that's another reason mosquitoes go for standing water. When they are in their larval stage, they're very distinctive. They're very wiggly in the water, and they do breathe air. They are oxygen breathing critters. Here you see a mosquito larva on the bottom attached to the surface of water. They have little siphons on their posterior end, and that's where they breathe. Uh, but most of the time they spend wiggling around in the water and eating. And when you look in standing water, it's pretty easy to identify the fact that you have mosquito breeding going on in there because of all this wiggling. Mosquito larvae also go through various instars. They shed their outer casing, they get bigger and bigger, and when they get to the point where they are ready to pupate, they form this kind of casing. It's kind of similar in a way to the harder, the less extensive motile uh, uh, casing of the pupal casing of the monarch butterfly. When they're in their pupal stage, they also swim around and they look like little swimming commas. The punctuation mark the comma. Pupa also will attach themselves to the surface of water to breathe. And then finally, out of that pupal casing, an adult mosquito will hatch. That mosquito will spend a little bit of time on the surface of the water. Its wings are stretching out, its wings are hardening, and from that moment on, for the rest of its life, it will become a flying insect, no longer aquatic, but terrestrial. And mosquitoes can go through this entire life cycle as fast as in 3 days in really hot weather. The hotter it is, the faster that reproductive whole system of cycles occurs. Mosquitoes can be disease vectors. All species of mosquitoes take a blood meal from some kind of prey in order to reproduce, but not all mosquitoes bite humans, and absolutely not all mosquito species carry diseases. But the species of mosquitoes that are vectors of diseases carry diseases that are of serious concern to humans. They're rare. Not everybody gets them, but when you get them, they can be a major, major problem. And because some mosquitoes uh, uh, take they don't get all the blood that they need to reproduce from one source, from one bite. They're what's called sip feeders. So a female mosquito might take blood meal from multiple sources, perhaps from a bird, which can be a vector of some of these diseases, and then bite a human, or a horse and then bite a human. Humans are dead-end hosts, the last host for several of these diseases. But there are Zika virus, for example, can also be transmitted from human to human. And because of COVID, we know what viruses can do. They can mutate and then have the capacity to um, infect multiple kinds of hosts and really change their transmission patterns. So it's important to know who's around, who's biting whom, and protect yourself accordingly. And that also helps you not be paranoid. So why don't we just get rid of them all? Why don't we just eliminate this species? Well, that is one of the big hubris-headed questions of our species, Homo sapiens. They're very important parts of the food chain. Fish eat them. Dragonflies are their number one predator. Birds and bats eat them. Mosquitoes can pollinate plants. They're not what I would call a competent pollinator, but an insect that flies from one plant to another and collects pollen on its legs or on its body is going to transfer that pollen from one plant to another, and there you have a support for plant reproduction. And it's very, very important, as I said, to understand which mosquito species feed on humans and which mosquito species carries diseases of concern to humans. Most mosquitoes do not feed on humans, and there's one species of mosquito that actually feeds on the larva of other mosquitoes, which is a really cool zombie fun fact in the mosquito world. There are over 3,500 unique species of mosquitoes on Earth. Individual species in these three genera, these three groups, are the only ones that carry diseases of concern to humans at this point in time. And take a look at these mosquito bodies, at their coloration, at their body posture, at their wing alignment. This gets us into understanding mosquitoes and will take us into Mosquito Alert, the citizen science project, because there are such unique differences between mosquito species. This, for example, is the Aedes albopictus. This is also called the tiger mosquito. For a while, it was being called the Asian tiger mosquito, but the Asian was dropped. You know, we're trying to name things so that they do not impugn groups that are the subject of criticism and other kinds of doodah. So we just call it the tiger mosquito now, Aedes albopictus. Aedes is actually a pretty big genus of mosquitoes. Aedes vexans is what's called the floodwater mosquitoes. We tend to have those after big flooding events. They do not feed on, they bite humans. They're pretty vicious biters, but they don't carry diseases. And this species, Aedes albopictus, is the less competent vector of the diseases that it can carry because it bites some humans and it bites animals. Its relative, Aedes aegypti, which looks similar, and we do not have that in our region yet. Aedes aegypti is the major vector of Zika, chikungunya, and dengue. And we're keeping an eye out for that mosquito's migration into our region, which is another good reason for a citizen science project like Mosquito Alert. This baby is pretty common. This is a mosquito in the Culex family, another big family. This is Culex pippins, or the northern house mosquito. This mosquito is a vector of West Nile virus and St. Louis encephalitis, both of which we have had sometimes fairly serious numbers of cases in the greater St. Louis region, including Illinois. Illinois Health Department and the Missouri Health Department track those separately, and hopefully they'll keep talking to each other and they won't just become siloed as health science gets a little weirder. This mosquito tends to bite at dusk and dawn. This is one of the mosquitoes that if you want to avoid it, you can stay indoors at dusk and dawn, or you can make sure to use mosquito repellent when you're out. However, the Aedes albopictus actually bites anytime. Does not distinguish in day parts for its feeding preferences. And this is a mosquito that we do not have in our area at this time. Thank you very much. This is a mosquito in the Anopheles genus. It is the kind that carries malaria, which is not a virus. The other diseases were viral diseases. Malaria is a parasite. And Anopheles mosquitoes bite in early morning to late evening. We did, however, have in 2023, we had an incidence of locally transmitted malaria in Texas and in Florida. So we can get the kinds of mosquitoes migrating and taking up residence, especially as the climate changes in our area, the kinds of mosquitoes that carry diseases. And public health officials are really on the lookout for this. Let me pause a minute and see if anybody has any questions about mosquitoes. I'm going to go into Mosquito Alert, our citizen science project. I don't see any additional questions. Okie dokie. Mosquito Alert is a citizen science project that was developed super fast in 2016 in Barcelona, Spain, by a team at the University in Barcelona. This was in response to the serious uptick of Zika virus in 2016, which had impacts in Florida, in the US. It had a major impact in Brazil. The Summer Olympics was in Rio de Janeiro that year. There was a lot of concern about Zika virus that year. A lot of research was done quickly that tried to confirm the correlation of the serious birth defect, microcephaly, babies born with small heads from as a result of Zika virus. Pregnant women were very much at risk of contracting, if they contracted the virus, of their babies born with that birth defect. By the end of the mosquito season in 2016, health officials knew that Zika could be transmitted from human to human through sexual contact. We learned a lot about that really fast, very much like we learned a lot about SARS-CoV-2 when the coronavirus kicked up. And in Barcelona, tech folks and biology folks responded by creating an app that citizens of Barcelona downloaded on their phone. They would take their cameras out into the city, and when a mosquito landed on them or when they saw a mosquito breeding site, they would photograph it and upload that photographic information into Mosquito Alert. The public health officials were able to map where mosquitoes were breeding and the kinds of mosquitoes were active. And I found out about this, I think I might have found out about it in 2016, for sure in 17, and was a key person, frankly, in starting the project that we now have in our area, which is Mosquito Alert, STL. We were the first city in the US, or the first metro area in the US, to be using this as the kind of citizen science project it was developed to be. A researcher in Florida has been using Mosquito Alert, but for more field research, not the citizen science project. So when you use this app on your mobile phone, it's free to download. Your sightings uploaded through the app's technology send your sightings, your report of mosquito breeding locations, types of mosquitoes, through a team of entomologists who evaluate the image, evaluate the finding, and validate, if they can, what kind of mosquito you're seeing, and then send that data point on to our local public health agency. And we have Mosquito Alert configured in the St. Louis area so that sightings are reviewed by local entomologists anywhere within our greater St. Louis region. It's called the Area of Statistical Significance. It is the 8 Illinois counties, the 7 Missouri counties, and the city of St. Louis that basically our TV stations broadcast to. So we have a bounding box around Mosquito Alert so that our local entomologists can be really key partners in this, and so that findings can be transmitted directly to our local public health agencies. Now, right now, those partners are St. Louis County Department of Health and the City of St. Louis Vector Control Department. We would like to be able to expand that to public health officials in other counties, and perhaps through NGREC, we can do that. So Mosquito Alert STL. It's pretty easy to use. You download the app. You photograph the mosquitoes, and that's a little challenging, but if you've ever participated in anything like, Tick Watch, or the Bee Atlas, or Shutterbee, you get the hang of photographing insects. And you can also photograph mosquito breeding sites. Mosquito Alert geolocates your finding, but in a general way. It's not like Google is always tracking where you are, but it will generally locate where the signing came from so that it gives some geographic data to our public health agencies. That's a privacy protection that's built into it. And this adds our community eyes and brains and smartphones to the capacity of our public health agencies to do surveillance about what kind of mosquitoes we have active in our area. And there are little guides in Mosquito Alert that will help you identify the species that you report. If you remember the mosquito photos that I showed a few minutes ago, coloration, pattern, wing alignment, body posture, all of those are pretty good identifying characteristics. And this is just a little bit about the activity of the project here in 2025. We've got a lively Instagram and Facebook presence. We have a website hosted by the Missouri Botanical Garden, mobot.org/StL. We'll be doing outreach this year around town. Big new thing for us is we'll be at the Earth Day Festival. We've been to various health fairs. We've spoken to Master Gardener training days. To the extent that we can, we like to participate in community events and educate people about mosquitoes as well as encourage them to use the app. And a big thing that our colleagues at St. Louis U are doing, they are doing a formal research project working on evaluating the efficacy of a citizen science project like this in supporting the work of public health agencies. So we have completed interviews with representatives of community partner agencies and with individuals who are mosquito alert users. And our team from the St. Louis University School of Public Health and Social Justice is in the process of evaluating these findings. We'll be writing the findings up for publication and we'll be presenting them through formal academic channels. Yay! This is some screenshots of some of our social media engagement. We do have a regular feed during mosquito season. So that's a little bit about mosquito alerts. Anybody have any questions about that? Check the chat. Hope I'm not missing stuff here. I don't think I do because I'm not seeing questions in the chat. Let me go on. So here's a big thing. This is a really important thing to know. Bug fogging, bug spray kills bugs, period. Chemical insecticides do not differentiate between kinds of bugs, particularly not anything that is fogged or sprayed. So a pest control agency that tells you that they use environmentally friendly substances, I'm sorry, but I am not buying that. And there are really rigorous practices with some public health agencies about doing aerial fogging. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. But there are also a bunch of municipalities in our area that have a fogging truck and will send the parks guys or the public works guys out to do routine fogging. Not very effective. So the best thing to know is that bug spray, bug fog kills bugs. Let's do something else more ecological. Just a brief moment here to show you what the public health professionals do. I talked a little bit about tagging and monitoring relative to monarchs. With mosquitoes, a relatively well-staffed and well-funded public health agency like St. Louis County will send staff out in the summer with mosquito traps to do surveillance. They will set traps that attract gravid mosquitoes with standing water and decaying plant matter, and they will set these traps in places where mosquito breeding is reported or suspected. Bring the contents of the traps back to a lab where the contents are literally analyzed. What species of mosquitoes are those mosquitoes? Are they carriers of the diseases that we are concerned about? And then we'll communicate those findings to state public health agencies as well. The other thing that our public health agencies will do is they will do larviciding. They will treat standing water with stuff that is not harmful to aquatic life or to birds or reptiles or amphibians. They will use a substance that we can use in our homes, BTI, Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, that is only toxic to insects in Diptera, the fly family. So it's probably going to take out a few fly larvae too. But BTI is very specific to insects in one family. It doesn't harm bees, it doesn't harm dragonflies, and the larviciding will be done in places where there is standing water on public property. This might be around parks. It might be where streams run through neighborhoods on common property or public property, and that helps control mosquito breeding during the mosquito season. The last ditch effort is running trucks around and doing aerial fogging. This used to be a really common practice, but it is not anymore because it's not effective. Fogging only kills the adult insects, flying insects that the chemical contacts, and can and does harm other kinds of flying insects. It does nothing, absolutely zero, nothing to interrupt mosquito breeding. Larviciding is what does that. But we like to see our municipal folks, our county folks doing something we think will keep us safe. And many of us have grown up believing in chemical magic. And so a lot of people want our municipal officials and county officials to run fogging routes. When you know that this is not an effective thing, you can have an intelligent conversation with your local officials. And I have had the privilege of going to talk to municipal folks about this to explain what's what on behalf of the Missouri Botanical Garden and help municipalities more intelligently manage mosquito populations than just driving around trucks spraying out chemicals. The and also individuals can opt out of fogging schedules, but insects don't recognize property boundaries. So if you're gardening for pollinators and you say, I don't want the fog turned on when the truck goes by my house, that fog can migrate and harm the pollinating insects that you're gardening to support anyway. The difference in pest control chemical usage a really important thing to understand. A public health agency like St. Louis County will calibrate their equipment so that the droplet size is very, very small to target the insect that the fog is supposed to target, which is mosquitoes, less likely then to be harmful to other flying insects, larger insects like bees, butterflies, moths. And we'll keep that equipment tuned to maintain that calibration. There will be no residual chemical added to the stuff that is used in fogging to get it to persist. Those droplets are only active for about 15 minutes and then they disperse. They also disperse in UV light. And the use of fogging in St. Louis County it will only be triggered when their surveillance indicates the presence of species of mosquitoes that are likely to carry diseases. St. Louis County will not do this for the many municipalities that contract with them to do vector control, mosquito management, even if the municipality wants it. And I'm sorry to say that I don't know what the practice is at this point in Madison County or St. Clair County, but this is a really good example of a local government agency that is really practicing effective pest management. Now, private pest control companies will market their services to say, we will keep your yard mosquito free for 30 days. And when they spray the plants, there is a residual chemical, a barrier chemical added to that fogging mix that remains on the plants for up to 30 days and makes every plant on that property lethal to any insect that lands on that plant. And why do they do this? Because people want it and they advertise. And one of the best ways to educate your neighbors and motivate your neighbors not to go for this is to have a conversation about what this means. Can be challenging, but can be done. I'm just going to check and see if anybody has a question at this point in time. In the chat, suggested yard plantings that will repel mosquitoes. You know, the plantings, well, okay, one thing, if you have biodiverse plantings in your yard, you are going to be your yard will be less hospitable to mosquitoes because it will be more hospitable to diverse populations of critters that prey on mosquitoes. There's no silver bullet for mosquito controls. Putting up a bat house is not necessarily going to give you plant-based mosquito controls. And putting plants in your yard like what are they called? Oh shoot, they look like geraniums. Citronella plants. I'm sorry, but that is not going to keep mosquitoes away from you because the plant is planted and you are moving around and you are the mobile target that the mosquito is seeking. So there are much better ways than biodiversity in your plantings, yes, but planting specific plants to repel mosquitoes, no. And so Joey is saying, asking about mosquitoes. the species of mosquitoes that are found in Alaska or the boundary waters of Minnesota. Those are very different species than we have here. I was visiting family property in Minnesota in the summer of 2001, and I got a mosquito bite up there that was worse than any tick bite I've ever had. It was amazing. It has to do with the kinds of mosquitoes that are active in any area. And because there are probably estuaries in and around the boundary waters, and it is a very riparian part of the continent, that those also are, I'm sure, factors that give rise to hefty mosquito populations. Good questions. Okay, so knowing where mosquitoes breed, how to protect yourself, how to protect our pollinators, control mosquito breeding in your yard, talk to your neighbors, help control it in neighboring properties. This is the best graphic that I found that shows the kinds of places that mosquitoes tend to breed in and around human habitations. Now, fountains and bird baths, actually, that is in error. Fountains are a burble in the water, and when the water moves, there's much less the accumulation of decaying plant matter is not going to be as attractive to gravid mosquitoes, and mosquitoes are not attracted to moving water. They're attracted to stagnant or still water. And bird baths, you're going to change the water in your bird bath every day or so anyway for the health of the birds. So unless you have a bird bath and you're on vacation, or your neighbor has a bird bath and they're not paying attention to it, and it becomes a basin of stagnant water, fountains and bird baths are not an issue. But buckets, leaky hoses, toys laying around, water bowls for pets, a frisbee in the backyard that the dog left out, boat, uncovered boats, or even coverings on boats and pools that water tends to pool in, clogged gutters, corrugated drain pipes. Those are all places that mosquitoes can breed. Low, soggy places in your yard are ideal places for mosquitoes to breed. And tires are ideal mosquito breeding habitat because there's something about the smell of the rubber in tires that has been shown by research to be very attractive to mosquitoes. So in neighborhoods or communities where there tends to be illegal dumping, tires are one of the things that gets dumped a lot. And then that becomes a mosquito breeding hazard in communities where people may or may not have the resources to think about controlling mosquitoes. But knowing where mosquitoes breed is really helpful in being able to control them. Find standing water and dump it. The best way to do this is to go around your property after rain, go with a kid, find the places where water tends to accumulate. Pick it up, put it in the shed, put it in the recycling bin, put it in the trash or the garage if you need to, but eliminate those sources of standing water. You can set mosquito traps in soggy parts of your yard, but different species of mosquitoes tend to be attracted to slightly clearer water, so a mosquito trap is not a be all and end all. And then you have to remember to treat that standing water with larvicide like the professionals do. This is that same stuff, Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, or BTI. It is a strain of a um, bacteria that occurs naturally in soil spores. This is not a synthetic substance. And there's different strains of BT. Another strain of BT you can use to treat tent caterpillars, but BTI, Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, is specific to insects in the fly family, Diptera, and it is a very effective way to control mosquito breeding in standing water that you cannot eliminate. You can get mosquito dunks. They look like little gray donuts. They come in packages of 6 or 2 at any hardware store, any home improvement store. It's a little bit harder to find it in bit form. You can order it online. Some big box stores do sell it. The bits are a little bit easier to broadcast, especially if you want to broadcast it a little ways up in corrugated drain pipes. But what you do is you put this stuff in standing water that you cannot eliminate. It changes the chemistry of the standing water and mosquito larvae cannot eat. Therefore, they cannot proceed in their development. I like to say it makes mosquito larvae's guts explode, but really that's hyperbole. So I always say it and I always qualify it. And this stuff will not harm birds, fish, amphibians, or pets. It is only toxic to insects in the fly family Diptera. The other thing is protecting yourself from mosquito bites. Don't be thinking about plants. Don't be hiring somebody to come and make all the plants in your yard lethal death traps just so that you can go out in your yard sometimes, maybe. Use a good mosquito repellent. This is where the chemical action really matters. And we used to only have one kind of active ingredient, DEET, that the US EPA recommended. DEET was developed during World War II to protect US troops fighting in the Pacific Theater. It is a synthetic chemical. It is a very effective mosquito repellent. However, there are also on the US EPA's list now several plant-based ingredients that have been shown to be, research has shown them to be effective at repelling mosquitoes. How a mosquito repellent works, it's kind of like an invisibility cloak that you spray on, and it jams the sensory signals that mosquitoes are using to find you as prey. The other things you can do is wear loose, light-colored clothing. Mosquitoes are more attractive to dark colors than they are to light colors. Light colors will keep you cooler in summer. When you're sitting outdoors, plug in electric fans. Mosquitoes are wimpy flyers. When there's a breeze, they cannot land on you and you will be cool. And in all of my experience talking about this, there are very few people that know that fans are an effective mosquito repellent. The thing about mosquito repellents, when you buy them, they work differently with different people's body chemistry. Mosquitoes are also attracted to lactic acid that's given off after we exercise. They're attracted to fragrance. Summer is a really good time to go fragrance free with things like detergent and body wash. Any extra fragrance that you put on or that you have on your clothing is going to additionally attract mosquitoes. So understanding that, making yourself as minimally attractive to mosquitoes as possible is another really, really good way to protect yourself from mosquito-borne diseases and use the chemicals where they make the most sense. So just wrapping up here, when we understand mosquito and monarch, biology and ecology, we can use that eco-sense to promote habitat for the beneficial insects, control the pests, educate ourselves, educate our neighbors. And then when you bring in a little bit of techno sense with it too, with an app like Mosquito Alert STL, or participating in a citizen science project like Monarch Watch, that also really adds our capabilities to the professional efforts and allows us to become more powerful forces to protect the pollinators and control the pests. Planting native plants, something really powerful, really impactful, joyful, nature connecting that anyone can do. You can grow native plants and native plant habitats, including milkweed, in on the patio or on acreage. And as I said before, a really good starting place for how to do it, how to design a native garden, where to get the native plants. All that stuff is on this one website, grownative.org. And they update their resource guide annually, which has new planting plans, new plant lists. There is a wonderful list at the end of Grow Native professional members. So if you want to hire someone to do landscape design or landscape maintenance, or you want to know where to get the plants, or you want to know who is doing education in our region, all of that is part of Grow Native resources. And give Mosquito Alert a try. Join our SWAT team. You can download it at mosquitoalert.org. These QR codes will also get you to Mosquito Alert. If you have an Apple or an Android phone. And we have a lot of good resources on our website, Mosquito Alert STL. We also have an Instagram group and a Facebook group, and we have prompts to get to those on our website. And we'll be updating those resources for the coming mosquito season. It's a partnership, as I said, of St. Louis University, School of Public Health and Social Justice, the Missouri Botanical Garden, St. Louis County Public Health Department, and the City of St. Louis Public Health Department. And then last but not least, we have a green resources information service at the Missouri Botanical Garden. We will take questions at any time by email or by phone about anything having to do with sustainable living. And I am the Garden's Green Answer Girl. So these questions come right to me. It's one of the most enjoyable parts of my job. We've had our plant doctor, our plant information service for decades. And since 2007, we've also had the planet doctor. And you're listening to her. So if you have specific questions after this talk or at any time, you can send them to us, greenresources@mobot.org or 314-577-0246. And if the answer is not immediately in-house knowledge base, we will research and get back to you, and that adds to our knowledge base. And it's a service we're happy to provide at no charge. That is my story. I'm sticking to it. Mosquito Alert is part of the St. Louis Regional Citizen Science Working Group. We had our last meeting out at Engrec, and then we had a little citizen science fair at the Old Bakery Brewery in Alton. So there are strong partnerships along these lines on both sides of the river, and we look forward to helping to continue to promote citizen science action through our agencies and our mutual work and our mutual understanding. Anybody want to ask any live questions?
Hey,
Or
Jean,
did?
this is
And
Danielle.
questions for mosquitoes?
Yeah, so this is Danielle. I just wanted well, first off, to thank you. But then one thing I was hoping you might be able to clarify for us. A lot of the people who are probably on this session tonight and who might be watching it later on the recorded sessions, they're from other parts of Illinois that are outside of the
Yes.
St. Louis area.
Yes.
And so if they're submitting data in the Mosquito Alert app, is someone looking at that data too? Are there scientists or people who are helping to identify those mosquitoes, or is that just
So
kind of a whole?
that's a good question. So because Mosquito Alert is still in its early stages, and frankly, we have not a lot of users yet. We're going to be working this mosquito season on really boosting that usage. As I said, we have defined the geographic area that our team of entomologists is evaluating as 8 Illinois, 7 Missouri counties, and the city of St. Louis. If you're further outside than that, you can use Mosquito Alert, but your sighting will actually be reviewed probably by European entomologists. Mosquito Alert is in use all over Europe and in parts of Africa and the Caribbean, and we're really proud that we're the first place in the US that's doing it. If we were to when hopefully we have the capacity to expand Mosquito Alert service, we will have to grow the number of entomologists that participate in the project, and then we will look at expanding that bounding box, but we're not at that point yet. You can use Mosquito Alert anywhere in the world, and someone will review your sightings and get back to you. But in terms of being an effective, locally engaged citizen science project, at this point, it's limited to the St. Louis region.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see, I don't see any other new questions in the chat. Let's see. So I did have another question. And so this goes back to the monarchs. When you're catching to tag the monarchs, how do you catch them without injuring them? Because I've never participated in that project because I was afraid I would injure the monarch, and I know that butterflies are relatively delicate creatures, so I didn't want to be more of a problem than a help.
They are delicate creatures, and I can't literally answer that because the monarchs that I tagged, they had hatched out of chrysalids from the caterpillars that we got at the Missouri Botanical Garden. So the monarchs were ready to be released, and we were tagging before they were releasing. However, I think if you go to monarchwatch.org, that is a likely place to look for information about how to catch monarchs. And, butterfly nets, that's one really good thing. When holding a monarch butterfly, that was kind of icky the first time, and I was really afraid of injuring it. But when the butterfly folds its wings, you just pick it up very gently by both wings, and you affix the tag to the wing, and then you let it go. And the tag you kind of just give it a little gentle press. It wasn't as, it was a little hardier than I thought it was going to be when I did that.
Great. All right. Anybody else has a question?
Yes, Michelle said there's a how-to guide on the Monarch Watch site. And we're going to be working this year for this mosquito season in a little video about how to photograph mosquitoes. We've had some great trainings by, especially by Mike Dawson, the frog guy. He does Frog Watch from the St. Louis Zoo, about how to use iNaturalist when you are participating in a BioBlitz or you're, just generally using iNaturalist, about how to photograph plants, how to photograph insects. We're going to be doing a little bit more focused stuff about that, about how to photograph mosquitoes, but especially how to focus your camera.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you very much once again for the great presentation. And thanks to all of you who joined us tonight for Jean's time with us. Before you go, I did want to mention that the registration for our RiverWatch training workshops is now open. And also, speaking of photographing organisms and putting pictures on iNaturalist or some other app, we do have a new crayfish monitoring program that we're launching. If you're at all interested in learning more or participating, we will have an online training workshop on March 18th. And if you want some more details, you can email riverwatch@lc.edu or visit our Facebook page and see what we've got going on.
Thank you, Danelle, and thank you everyone for your kind comments. It's really, thanks RiverWatch for all you're doing. It's really a pleasure to get to address you. And I think I'm coming out there to do an in-person talk at some point in the not too distant future. Yes?
I think that's something that Erica has set up for us.
I think it's Homegrown National Park, which is Doug Tallamy's idea, which is that's like plants, 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 plants.
Yep, right up your alley. All right. Well,
Thanks, Gene. Thanks, Danelle.
thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.